Hello, we're recording.
We're recording, and we have a guest today.
We do.
Hello.
We'd love to introduce you to the lovely Eddie, who I believe also goes by Tennis Asia on Twitter. So we thought, who better to get on than this guy, given it's the Asian swing we are in now. Tennis is now in Asia, in the Far East. And Eddie, tell us a bit about yourself. Obviously, a lot of our following are outside the Twitter sphere, so may not necessarily know who you are and what you're doing. But just tell us a bit about yourself and why you are known as Tennis Asia.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. That is my handle. Yeah, Tennis Asia. You can find me there. My name's Eddie, and basically I've been living in Seoul for a little while, and I was interested in tennis in the region and going to tournaments and just following tennis in general. So I've been posting for a long time on Twitter as well, a few years about tennis in Asia. And most recently, at the start of this year, I started a podcast with my friend Alistair here in Seoul, all about Asian tennis. And we've been doing that for a few months, and we've had a little break since I was away in the US. But hopefully we're going to, obviously, with the Asian swing here now, hopefully be recording another episode tomorrow. So yeah,
I didn't realize, but we were talking just before we started, but Eddie was in New York for the US Open, and I was like, we could have walked right by each other, never known.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was there for just the first time in New York. It was great, and then I was there. I managed to see the final round of qualies and the first two rounds. The first 2 days. It was the first round, and I was going to go to the evening session one day, but then I randomly decided, okay, I'm going to go today. But then when I tried to buy tickets, my card kept on getting declined, and by the time I unblocked my card, I was like, it was a little bit late, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go now. But then I regretted it afterwards because I missed Popperin against Djokovic, so that would have been quite interesting to see. But
That would have been quite the moment to witness.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, we're here to talk about the Asian swing. So right now, both tours are in Asia. Nick and I, I'm in the US on the East Coast. Nick is in the UK. And I don't know about you, Nick, but trying to watch tennis live over the next, the last couple of weeks and for the next month, really, it's going to be tough. I have been watching a lot of replays.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar position. I mean, it's slightly less tough for me than for you if I was willing to get up early. I think that's probably more because tennis, certainly when I'm thinking about Seoul, that starts at about 4 a.m. my time usually, and carries on well into my working hours. So I was fortunate that I wasn't working for some of this week, so I actually did watch some of the early parts of Seoul, and I could then watch it over the weekend. Wahin kind of went a little bit later, which kind of interfered with other plans. But yeah, that was that's kind of been the interesting thing for me. So yeah, unfortunately, because I have a job and I have to go to work, like any tennis watching window in terms of live is very small, unless, as I said, I'm willing to wake up in the morning. Anastasia, I get the feeling that in New York, that's not even an option. It's like you go to sleep and wake up when tennis is happening. Now, I did put a social media post out moaning about this a little bit, but Eddie and a few others who are based in Asia quite rightly called me out for saying that this is your experience of tennis pretty much the rest of the year.
Anything that's in like North America or South America, that time zone is terrible because it's usually always for us here. It's going to be basically when I'm in bed, but maybe you might get like a night match and it'll be on like at breakfast time. You can catch it then, but for the most part, you're like, unless you're just going to stay up all night, that's just But sometimes we just have to do that. There's this is tennis, isn't it? It's always going on, and and it's always going to be on somewhere with it's difficult to watch. But
yeah, that's true. It's just part of being a tennis fan is getting a few clocks and putting them up on your wall and just knowing all of the time zones. and which ones work for you. But getting into the tennis in Asia, let's start with the tournaments. Like, what are the marquee tournaments? Because there are a lot of tournaments going on, for example, on the ATP side. Well, both. Well, no, Korea was a 500 for the WTA, but there are a few 250s going on. So there are a lot of tournaments happening. But Eddie, what would you say are the sort of the marquee tournaments that fans can be looking forward to in Asia this season?
I mean, it's got to be the 1,000 tournaments, right? I mean, on the men's side, we've got the one Masters tournament in Asia that is in Shanghai. Of course, that's going to be huge for, tennis in Asia, just to have that one. And of course, more often than not, you'll still get most of the players playing there. And then on the women's side, we've got two WTA 1000s. We've got first in Beijing, which is about to start. And then we've also got Wuhan, which returns after like 5 years, isn't it? Because of the pandemic and everything. So, and China being closed and for various reasons. So, yeah. So, obviously those are the biggest tournaments where you're going to see, hopefully most of the bigger players. I know that, inevitably you'll get a few withdrawals. What I would say, yeah, obviously there's a lot of people feel, like after US Open that tennis, they find it hard to focus on what's going on. But of course, for the players, it's still important right now for some of those top players in that they are trying to qualify for the year-end finals and they want to finish the year well. So these tournaments do become very important for some of those players in the top 10.
And that's particularly the case on the WTA side, where these are the last two 1,000 tournaments back to back. This is their last, chance for a big points haul to try and qualify for end of season championships. ATP have got their European indoor season where there's a few points on offer there that can kind of help boost a little bit. But yeah, this is a tight turnaround for over the next few weeks. Obviously, like you talked about, the marquee tournaments being the ones that are with the biggest points yield, so all these Chinese tournaments. But are there any tournaments outside China that sort of get a lot of attention, regardless of their sort of status on the tour?
Outside China, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, the Asian swing these days is mostly tournaments in China, especially on the women's side. Well, actually, on the men's side as well. But one tournament that's been running for a very long time is the tournament in Tokyo in Japan. I believe like the ATP tournament's been running since the 70s or something like that. So it's been continuous. So yeah, I have been to Tokyo. I went there for the tournament in 2019 was the last time I went, which was, of course, we had the pandemic and everything. I just haven't been back, and that was, it's a really nice stadium there, and it's pretty easy to go there, and it's a really nice stadium. And then of course it was good when it was better when he's actually coming back now. We've got Nishikori, right? Of course, Nishikori was a great top 10 player. He's kind of on the comeback now, so it'll be interesting to see, because he's probably going to play in Tokyo. I think he's got a wild card if he needs it. So it's a nice tournament. Obviously, Tokyo's a great city as well, just to visit in itself, and it's a great time to go now because the exchange rate is so good for you. The yen's very weak, so it's a great time if you want to go to Tokyo. If you want to see, there's also a WTA tournament there. It's a great, probably especially if you're American, the tickets are going to be so cheap. So,
wow. That's good to know. You talk there about Nishikori, which takes me to sort of the players, and I wanted to talk about a little bit because I've never been to Asia ever. It's big, really high up on the bucket list, especially Tokyo. What is tennis popularity like in Asia? And we've seen in the recent years the rise of Chinese players, especially. For example, before we started this podcast, I actually watched back to back. They've been doing this actually, interestingly, but Triple Z and Jerry Shang, they both won their matches really close to each other today. So what is popularity of tennis like right now in Asia? And have these players, I assume these players have sort of contributed to that.
Yeah, so First of all, I mean, Asia's. I mean, it's a big place.
Yeah.
Obviously, most of the tennis, yeah, is focused on East Asia. But yeah, so right now we have a lot of tournaments in China. It's definitely, I would say, it's growing in this part of the world we're in. I mean, I can talk first of all specifically about being in Korea. Tennis has become very popular for people to play, and it's been a big trend actually. Even younger people in their 20s and 30s have sort of taken up tennis, and it sort of started. You remember when Chan Chung got to the Australian Open semi-finals?
Oh, that was a great story.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and obviously it was a bit of a shame for him afterwards because he struggled physically and he hasn't really played much, since then. But at the time, yeah, that definitely created an interest in tennis because it was big news at the time. And I think like during the pandemic and here, and I think this is probably true in other countries as well, people started to take up tennis because it was like something active
You
they
played
could
outside.
do, and you could do it outside, and it was kind of like sort of fairly COVID safe or whatever, right? So,
Yeah.
people, they wanted to do something outside, right? So that's definitely part of it, and I've noticed that trend here. It's now difficult to get to book courts, but of course, the biggest thing that's I think gets people interested in tennis, if you're talking about actually watching tennis, is actually having players that are playing the game. So I mean, in the last few years we've had. In Korea, we've had Kwon. He won. He was the first player to win 2 ATP titles, I think, right? And then he's also got right now in China. So we should talk about in the past in China we had Li Na, which was she won 2 majors, the Australian Open and the French Open. That was obviously huge. Since then, we had a bit of a lull, I would say. I mean, we've always had like a lot of Chinese players. On the women's side, especially, but not so much in the men's. But now that's changing. Yeah, we've got Jerry Shang, who's like 19 years of age. He's very talented. We've got Triple Z, who's Zhang Zhizhen, who is he's what is he in the top 40? He got to the top 40, so he's had a few scalps. He's beat players like Rude and so on. And then you've got also Bu, who just reached the semis. We've got the tournament in China just now.
That's such a great story. I'm so
Hangzhou.
excited.
Yeah, so you've got 2 Chinese players in the semi-finals are going to face each other. So you're going to have at least one in the final, and that's going to be huge because I mean you potentially also with Shang in the other tournament in Chengdu in the semis, you potentially got one of or maybe 2 of them winning their first ATP title. And it wasn't that long ago that it was the first Chinese man to win an ATP title was Wu Yibing. Who that was last year, and then unfortunately for him, he's had physical struggles since then. But I guess what most excites me though is probably Shang because 19 years of age, he's still got so much to go, and you can see that he's got a lot of talent. And then of course on the women's side, we've got we have, how could I forget, like Zhang Qinwen. So yeah, she is obviously now ranked like I think 7 in the world.
Yeah, she's in the top 10.
What was huge, of course, is she recently won the Olympic gold medal, which I think that would have got a lot of attention in China for sure. I know I've got a Chinese acquaintance, and she knows who she is. She's not someone that follows tennis, and she talked about, oh yeah, I know her though. Like when we were talking about tennis players, so that's huge. I mean, when you can got players winning gold medals, and potentially maybe Shang, I don't know if he's ever going to be a major winner, but he might be someone that can, in the future aim for top 10 and be competing with, if you were to be a Chinese player and get victories over, say, any of these top 5 players, obviously that's going to create a lot of attention in itself. So, I know that obviously in Japan, we had Nishikori, who managed to reach the slam final in the US. That was about 10 years ago. But he beat Djokovic to do that, and ever since then he's just been a massive star, right, in Japan. So it would be really good, I think, because in China, I would say that tennis, obviously you've got all those tournaments, but I'm not sure how popular it is as a sport in terms of like they've got other sports that they're interested in. So they, they've got like, I think they're very into basketball and obviously like table tennis, badminton, and these other sports that they follow. So it would be great, yeah, to be able to get some more Asian players, competing there. And then you've also got, even now on the men's side, you've got like Coleman Wong, who's from Hong Kong, but he's also a player with a lot of potential. I think he could be top 50 maybe. So this is an exciting time for, especially on the men's side. I mean, we've already had like a lot of women from China, especially. We've also got like from the Philippines, Alex Ayala on the women's side. I mean, I think she's still only 19, right? So she's from the Philippines, but she's not that highly ranked at the moment, but already because she had such success at juniors, she's like really well known in the Philippines. I don't think they've ever had like star players in sort of these bigger sports like that. I mean, unless you know who Manny Pacquiao is, he's the boxer, yeah. So, but I mean, yeah, they've got like a lot of potential there because China, massive country, right, huge population. And even the Philippines has got a massive population as well. So, yeah, I do think it is a sport which there's a lot of potential yet, but it's still growing. And I think, obviously, if we can see the success of these players, that would be do a lot. That would do more than anything, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think potential, you've summed it up there. It's like, we're seeing success, particularly in China, even if the popularity for spectators or even playing the sport is still growing. We're seeing the impact of the names that are being produced. I am super excited about Jerry Shang as well, like kind of really big on what he can do in his career. And Zheng Xinwen, obviously, I think is already now a star of the WTA, no question. I do want to say, like, yeah, it's probably your comment about sort of representing the whole of Asia is pretty fair because that's like expecting me to represent the whole of Europe, which I do not. But I think there were a few points in your answer earlier that sort of interested me.
Yeah,
because I think tennis has probably been fairly well established in Japan for a while. I mean, it used to be Tokyo used to be one of the biggest tournaments to go to on the men's and the women's side. Like it was a 1,000 level event or equivalent of for the men and for the women decades ago, or even for the women in the 2000s. So, and there's always a strong contingent of Japanese players, although I'm not aware of many new names coming through from there. The Korean one does fascinate me a little bit. You come in on the Japan thing a second. The Korean situation you outlined does fascinate me though, because like if you think that you can hardly book tennis courts, you could be seeing your next big Korean star coming through in like 10 to 15 years at this rate.
Yeah, so I have thought about that. There's definitely going to be, well, I say definitely, but there's a good chance, yeah, you might get a Korean player. And I actually think it might come on the women's side because what I would say, I think the impression I get is in Korea, like we've had a lot of men who are playing tennis in the past. It hasn't been so much women, but I think that's changed a lot now. And you've seen a lot more young girls playing it. And as I understand, there's a top player. I mean, she's only 13, but her name is Yeri Hong, who, I mean, she's obviously, you can't at that age project too far in the future. But I mean, I think she's already like sponsored by On and all this stuff. And she's been very good at that age. So that's just an example. Yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if because we've never really had too much recently, especially on the women's side in Korea. On the men's side, yeah, I'm not too sure who will be coming. I mean, I know there's a couple of Korean players who are playing in the junior slams, but I don't think they're particular standouts. But you're talking about the Japanese. There's a player who was the number 1 or number 2 junior, is it Rei Sakamoto? So he is. There's a little bit of buzz about him from Japan. And yeah, so I mean, obviously he's still young; he's barely starting. So, but as far as like being an ATP player, or playing in those main tour tournaments, I do think that's a reasonable, expectation maybe for him. So, and then of course we've still got Naomi Osaka as well. I mean, we didn't even mention her, but I mean, she's kind of on the comeback now. We don't know how that's going to go because she's shown glimpses here and there of her best, but it hasn't been consistent. I actually saw her at the US Open when she beat Ostapenko, but always still potential, and for her, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, as far as like, I mean, I do follow like the challengers a little bit and that level because there's quite a lot of Asian players at that level.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like there are definitely a lot of players coming up that, the Asian fan can sort of latch onto, and it's becoming a more popular sport to not only watch, but to play, which is great. And that kind of brings me to the tournament itself. And, as someone who's never been to an Asian tournament, I've been to tournaments in general, I think during the US Open, and you were here during the US Open, we were talking about like how expensive it can be compared to other Grand Slams and things like that. What is it? What is the tournament structure like? How easy is it to get tickets? How expensive or cheap? Or what is that process like?
Okay, so I mean, I don't know where to start. Okay, if we're going to start, let's maybe start with the Korea Open, which is just finished, and it was the first year as a WTA 500 tournament, which means the winner gets 500 points. It was upgraded from being a 250, which it has been pretty much since it started in 2004. I think it was 1 year it was a 125, but so it got upgraded, and there was a lot of expectation. Because, as a 500, they were going to invite more top 10 players. Unfortunately, with it being so soon after the US Open, all the top 10 players ended up withdrawing, which is understandable. But it's a bit disappointing from the fans' perspective. And that's something to always bear in mind, is that, that can always happen as a fan, which makes it difficult when you're traveling abroad to attend a tennis tournament. A lot of the time you can't really just cancel it. But so the Korea Open, the problem is this year, and I think it was the same last year, because of the Korea Open was sponsored by Hana Bank, which is a Korean bank, and they have this app which they do ticketing with, and that is what the app that the organizers wanted you to use to buy tickets for the Korea Open. But the problem is that particular app, I think it's only in Korean, and then you can use it but it's only like if you're a resident, and possibly even only if you've got a Korean bank card. So that is a major complaint of mine and many other. The foreign attendants coming from abroad. We've talked about the one we interacted with from Thailand. She'd come over, and she found a great difficulty to get tickets. I think for her, in the first week, it's not going to be sold out. So if you had to buy the tickets at the ticket office on the day, you'd probably be okay. But obviously, if you wanted to go in the semis and final, that's going to be a problem, because how are you going to? She was lucky enough to have someone in Korea that she could buy the tickets for her, but not everyone's going to be able to do that. So I find that a little bit strange.
Yeah, just for our listeners to clarify. So we got a message from Irene, who on X is Island Tennis Ace. She attended the Korea Open, and she was nice enough to do a little voice memo, which I'll insert here, about her experience at the Open. And this came up with how she, like, the main friction for her was how to buy tickets and the difficulty of buying tickets. So I'll insert that here.
Hi, this is Ailia, or Island Tennis Ace on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I recently attended my first WTA tournament at the Korea Open just this week. I think Seoul makes for a good host city. The city is very safe, their public transportation is efficient, the food is great, and the facilities are adequate. The venue is actually where they held the 1988 Seoul Olympics, where Steffi Graf completed the Golden Slam. So this is actually part of the whole Olympic Park where people can walk around, enjoy some outdoor time. I think it's actually part of a jogging trail for some people. So most of the grounds were accessible to the public, which I think was really great. It made curious folks have more access to tennis. Maybe they can watch players practice in person, or maybe they can view some of the matches that were being streamed live at the LED screen by the food area. The venue itself was also very easy to navigate. They were only using two show courts to play the matches on, center court and grandstand. And center court for me was like the Goldilocks size of stadiums, where everywhere you were seated, you can still get a pretty good view of the match, even actually if you were sitting at the highest level, which I tried to watch from. And yes, it was still a pretty good view. And of course, grandstand is great. You can get really close to the action, but the seating was limited. I feel like the logistics of the venue, the tournament, were very well managed. The food was reasonably priced. The markup was low or actually non-existent. Concessionaires were all over the site or spread throughout the site so that you can get refreshments wherever you were coming from or wherever you were exiting from the stadium. It didn't really make you walk so far just to get a drink, just to get like a snack or something. And toilets were also everywhere. I know that it's such a mundane thing to discuss toilets, but it's actually quite important when you're staying in one site for an entire day, and the toilets were kept clean all the time. The stadium itself was still suitable, but it was showing some age, like some of the rows of seats were broken, for example. My only real complaint is that it was hard for me as a foreigner to get pre-tickets or tickets before the tournament started as a non-Korean. They actually instructed us to call a hotline, but the agents who were answering didn't really speak adequate English to handle the transaction. But overall, it was still a great experience of my first time to see live pro tennis. And I would for sure consider coming back depending on where it falls on the schedule next year and who's on the entry list. That's it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share about this experience. Once again, this is Island Tennis Ace on Twitter.
Yeah, obviously. So, I mean, not to say that everything's bad about this tournament, but this is the particular thing that's particularly bad about this tournament this year. And I hope maybe they change that for next year. But because, you know, there's a lot of other aspects which were good in terms of, like, it wasn't too expensive. I would say the tickets are pretty reasonably priced. I mean, on the final day, it was still like the cheapest ticket was maybe like 30,000 won, which is only like less than $30. And honestly,
wow,
like the cheapest tickets, you know, that's going to be in the upper section. That stadium, the Olympic Stadium, which was used back in the 1988 Olympics, it's a 10,000 seat stadium, so it's pretty big, but you get a good view from everywhere. So that's a positive thing about going to the Korea Open. And it was pretty relaxed environment. Yeah, they have decent enough facilities. But what I would say is that, yeah, that's obviously the ticketing situation is a problem, and hopefully that will be changed. I'm not too sure about that. And the fact that they didn't have a dedicated website in terms of, like, they had the app that they were using, but in terms of, like, they didn't actually have a website. They were kind of using Instagram for most of their updates, which I thought was a bit weird. And now, but this, I should say though, that this is not the normal experience across tennis in Asia, because I have been to other tournaments where, like, for example, I went to Hong Kong, the ATP at the start of the year. It's the first time for that one because they usually have the WTA, which I've been to before, and that's going to be on soon, that's fine. Like, you can just buy tickets on the website. In fact, that was one of the most simple for me, actually, I would say. Buying tickets for the tournament in Hong Kong, pretty simple. You can just, go on and select your seats, and a little bit more expensive to go there. But, I can't say it's anything beyond expectation for tennis fans. So that's pretty good. That's on, yeah.
What do you like? So for the events coming up, for example, you've been to the one in Tokyo before. Are you going to go the 1,000 level events this year?
I don't think I will, because I've got other plans, and there's I don't think I'll be able to make it over, unfortunately. I have been to the Shanghai Rolex Masters before, and that was pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I think going to a Masters tournament is perhaps one of the best ways to get access to high level tennis, in the sense that, like, it's not as expensive, but you also kind of get, like, you're able to get like a more intimate experience with, like, sort of these bigger players, because, like, especially on those outer courts, sometimes you see them so up close, and I don't know, it's a different experience. I had a good time when I was in Shanghai. I looked up, actually, because you were talking about tickets. I mean, I think now, they've got a dedicated website. You can get on there and buy tickets. Only thing I would say is, like, obviously, if you're going to China, I mean, depends where you're from, but most people, you do need to apply for a visa before you go. So that's something to make sure you do. And you might have to pay for it, right? So you probably will have to pay a certain amount of money for that. So that's something to bear in mind. Whereas, if I was to go to Tokyo, I don't have to do it. I can just go in as a tourist, and it's a little bit simpler, right? Tokyo, it's good, yeah. I've been to Hong Kong, and I've been to Shanghai a while ago. Unfortunately, I haven't been to the WTA 1000 events in Wuhan or Beijing, but I mean, maybe one day I'll make the time. But I mean, I had a look, though, in terms of how to buy tickets for those events, and it seemed a little bit more difficult. I think you might have to make an account on the website to actually, like, buy the tickets. But
I was interested listening to Irina's post, because you've been to the Olympic Stadium for the Korea Open. She seemed to describe it as it was partially open to the public, so you could almost just walk by and experience tennis.
Yeah, so that's kind of true. So the way it is at the Olympic, because that particular venue is the Olympic Park, where the tennis stadium is, and that whole park is, like, it was designed for the Olympics in Seoul back in '88, but that now means, like, it's just mostly used for, like, concert venues and stuff like that as well. Some of the old venues. So, like, it's like an open park. So people could just, like, walk past and sort of peer in, say, to the outer courts, but you couldn't actually get in and sit down unless you had a wristband, right? So, but
right.
You could actually sort of peer in if you didn't have a ticket, but you wouldn't really be able to see anything. But or maybe like on one of the other courts, you could actually see, because there's one that doesn't really have, like, a stand. It's sort of like, but that there's hardly any matches on that particular court. So the best thing to do, if you it's not be cheap, and you just spend like $10 or $15 to buy a ticket, right? But, like,
I mean,
it's not that expensive.
For me,
so.
I just thought, in terms of sort of the local community, especially if there's a tournament, a 500 level tournament in your city, it seems like it's a pretty cool thing that you can almost just stumble on the tennis. And, I think fans are built that way sometimes.
I do wonder if some people, they probably, because, like, the Olympic Park is kind of like I guess it's a place that tourists might visit anyway. It's a nice part to walk around. But the great thing I would say about the Seoul tournament is, like, they have the subway stop, like an Olympic Park subway stop, and the exit to it is, like, right where the tennis is. It's that right at that side of the park. So you could just wander out and be like, oh, there's obviously a tennis tournament on. Let's just go and see what's going on there. And I think possibly some people did that. Yeah, usually they have, like, K-pop concerts and stuff in that park going on at the weekend. So you like might, while you're sitting at the tennis, you might actually hear music nearby. But yeah, so yeah.
Cool.
Um,
Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, on just to wrap this up, it's like, first of all, loved Irene's message, and she did highlight a very important topic, which was the toilet situation, which we do not talk about at tournaments enough.
Ever.
And someone needs to do that. So not weird at all, Irene. It got me kind of thinking. So obviously we've talked about sort of a lot of examples of people maybe traveling into Asia and to go and watch these events, and like maybe we've been thinking about it from someone traveling from, say, the US to go. But obviously you highlighted the problem with traveling to China, but I think there are, plenty of tournaments in a lot of Asian nations where people from home nations could go. So obviously China, Japan, Korea being the big ones, Thailand, but there are challenges that happen all around the continent as well, so the subcontinent, or even like the East Asian region, which is where we've been mainly focusing on. But let's say if you're someone from, like, in Irene's position, because she's coming from the Philippines, where I don't think that they might have a challenger or like ITFs, but yeah, so she's coming from there. So like we're talking about maybe how much you talked about some challenges of getting there. Is there any particular country or tournament that maybe you're traveling from within Asia that you want to go to a bigger tournament than maybe a challenger that's on your doorstep?
Yeah, so I mean, I had Thailand on the mind there. So there was actually, I don't know about the Philippines exactly. I don't know if they've got like,
or not specifically the Philippines, but like, say, like a country where you don't have a main tour event.
If you're talking about challenger, there's about to be a challenger this week in Thailand, in near Bangkok. So actually, it's Non-Thaburi 4. I think it's the 4th challenger there this year. So that's taken place. Yeah, Non-Thaburi is actually just outside of Bangkok, so it's accessible. I actually was in Bangkok just before I went to Hong Kong for that tournament. And then I actually went down one day to the first one. And, it's actually like kind of strange because you go down there and it's like not that many people. And then, but this is maybe a typical challenger experience in terms of like, you're just very close to the players. You just be like, oh, there's Luca Pui just walking past right here, and there's, whoever. So this week though, I would say that one in near Bangkok, that they have actually got some players that have been higher up. So the Dan Evans is playing, Karatsev. So you got some players in there.
That's a good lineup.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Common Wong is actually a player I've been keeping an eye on because I actually have 2 really good friends who are from Hong Kong. So it gives me like hey, have you checked out the Hong Kong tennis player as like an opener and in talking with them? But I guess the reason why I asked the question was more, we talked about Asia having a lot of potential, and like at the minute, Grandpass doesn't have a lot of listeners from the region. But it's more kind of how do we help maximize that, and like people who maybe like are getting into the sport and want to follow their favorite players around, maybe there's some places that's easier to get to than having to fly across to a Grand Slam in a completely different continent.
Right, I hear
the
what
case
you're
for any Asian tennis fan, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
unless you go to Australia. Australia's an option.
I think though, like, there's in Asia, like there are like, in terms of like ITF challengers, those lower level events. Yeah, you've got them going on a lot in Japan. There's like 3 challenger events, ATP challenger events in Korea. They have even an ITF women's event, a fairly large one recently, I think. And then, yeah, you definitely got events in Taiwan, China. You've got them going on in, I'm not sure, but do we have one in Singapore now? They had the ATP and WTA.
Singapore sounds familiar. Singapore does sound familiar. They've definitely had a tournament there at some point.
Yeah, and then you've got like, because the WTA and the ATP in Hong Kong, but they've also got challengers theirs as well. In Hong Kong, there's a WTA 125, I think, coming up this week. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. And so, yeah, these, what I would say, though, is anyone's listening, and this applies not only in Asia, but if you want to see some live tennis, if you find out if there's an ITF or a challenger going on in your area, a lot of the time it will be really cheap, or it will be free. Even you can even be a lot of the time it's free to attend these events. So like you can just go on there down there, and you'd probably be surprised at how good some of the tennis could be. And a lot of those players, or at least some of them, there might be players of tomorrow that are going to be potentially very big, or potentially stars. So it's a good way to just, if you want to see some live tennis, you don't actually have to go very far potentially. And yeah, a lot of people might not know that it's even going on in their area until they look it up. It's not the best. It's not really promoted so much, right? So
yeah, and you can say you saw it first. You saw them first. I know all people who maybe saw Carlos Alcaraz when he was, I don't know, 15 and playing at an ITF. We're like, I saw him first. I saw him there first. Okay. I mean, this was a really lovely in-depth conversation about sort of the general state of tennis in Asia, which I really love. If you're listening to this, I definitely would bookmark it for if you're planning a trip at some point. I mean, your point about like, if you want to visit China for one of these opens, you have to get a visa. It's such a lot of people might not know that. And it's something you have to plan ahead a little bit. But yeah, there's always tennis nearby. You'll always be surprised like what's happening literally in your backyard. So moving on to the tennis that actually happened this week, we'll run through it really quickly and also discuss what is coming up. But so it's really interesting, and maybe you know this reason more than I do, Eddie, but on the ATP side, for example, we have 2 tournaments going on, but they started on a Wednesday, I think. So they're not even, usually we talk about finals Sunday, and now it's going to be like finals Tuesday.
Yeah, this is also really confusing because they're doing this only as well on the ATP side, right? I don't think for this week we just had Monday to Sunday WTA tournaments, but then in the middle of the week, was it like Wednesday, the Chengdu and Hangzhou tournaments in China, men's tournaments started on a Wednesday, and then I think the final will be on Tuesday. So yeah, I think they started to do this. I think maybe this was to sort of help attendances in the Chinese swing or the Asian swing, because I guess the idea was that like you'd get because then you'd have like the midweek games, like which would be like, I don't know, like the second or quarterfinals, right? Second round of quarterfinals, whatever it is, on a weekend. Yeah. And so it gives more people a chance to see that, because then I think that's the thinking behind it, because then the semi-finals and then the final will be played on Monday and Tuesday in the evenings. So I think maybe that's the thinking behind it, but it gets a little bit confusing. It really confuses me because yeah, you're so used to it just running from Monday to Sunday. But yeah, I mean, I suppose if I was in China, living in China, I would quite like that, because the one of the nice things about earlier rounds is that you get a lot of matches to see, right? And so if you can go down on a weekend and see 4 matches or possibly more, then yeah, that's kind of cool. So yeah.
So starting with the men's side, we've been talking about tennis in Asia, and tennis is in Asia right now, and they have so many Chinese players who have now made the semifinals. So I think I'm going to pull it up, but Triple Z has made the semifinals. Jerry Shang has made the semifinals at the tournaments. We talked about this earlier, but this must be really great for the region to have sort of a home star to cheer for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think going back to what I was just talking about, one of the other reasons that maybe they fit in the change in the schedule, I think now, is that we're talking about this Masters tournament in Shanghai. I think it's running for like 10 days, is it? Or is it also a 2-week one? So I'm not entirely sure. Is it a 2-week one? I've got a
I'm
feeling
gonna look
is.
it up. They're almost
I've
all.
got it. So I don't know if that's part of the sort of.
I think it is a
change.
10-day event.
Yeah, I think it is now,
Yeah.
the Shanghai one. So, yeah, but obviously that's going to be really exciting, especially if one of these Chinese players manages to win an ATP title. We could have two of them winning a title each, and that obviously I think would create a buzz going into Shanghai. And then if you've got those players playing well coming into it, it's perfect. And then maybe you're going to have one of them play a big player and possibly get an upset during Shanghai. That's going to create a buzz, and you've got to say that would be great, wouldn't it, for the sport?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always think it's great to have these players playing well in their respective countries and creating popularity, not just there but anywhere in the world. But it's always good to have new places getting into the sport, and yeah, that's going to be exciting. And then, of course, we're going to have Zhang Qinwen. This is she's now a top 10 player, the top 7 player, and she's heading into this Asian swing as an Olympic gold medalist as well. So I don't think she's had, so she hasn't done much in terms of at the 1,000 level yet. So that's surely going to be a big goal of her in this little swing. And then she's also going to try and qualify for the WTA finals. So a lot to play for her, especially, and that's going to be interesting. Yeah, she's maybe not done so much on because I think like in Asia the courts tend to be a bit quicker, but she's maybe she sort of favors maybe the slower a bit better, but she's got.
But she did make the Australian Open final, which is a faster speed court. So yeah, you're right in terms of she did, and US Open is actually she always does well there.
She got quarterfinals. Yeah,
faster end of things. And I think because Zhang actually won the Asian Games last year, so that's how she qualified for the Olympics. She didn't even have to worry about her ranking. Mm-hmm. So I'm expecting Zhang Qinwen to be a major player in these upcoming tournaments. I think she thrives on playing in an environment where her nation has an expectation, maybe. And I think she's definitely stepping things up. And I think she's in the mix.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to follow that, actually. Yeah, I mean, going to be a lot of excitement.
Yeah. So those are the two tournaments on the ATP side. For the WTA, we have winners for the Korea Open and the Thailand Open. So in Thailand, Beatrice Haddad Maia, the opposite way.
No, wrong way around.
Yeah, wrong way around. In Thailand, I guess we should start here. We should start here because it's the one I wanted to talk about.
Anastasia's way more excited about this than I am.
Mm-hmm. And it was your pick.
It probably shouldn't be this, but I know it was my pick. Like in Rome, I think, which is where she had a good run. And Rebecca Shramkova is the champion of the Thailand Open, having reached the final last week in the place escapes me. Monastir, yeah. So not an Asian tournament. Obviously, the only WTA tournament on the continent of Africa, but she lost that one to Sonai Kartal. But Shramkova handled the occasion a lot better in Thailand, and is now a WTA champion. And I think that's probably the next most exciting thing she's won to Player of the Fortnight.
Yeah. We love. I think my thought when we started Player of the Fortnight was to help introduce lesser known players to an audience and also almost follow them throughout the year. And it's so cool that one of our picks actually had this success and is she's now, so she, with her run in the last week's final in Tunisia, she broke into the top 100, and now she is on the live rankings, number 61. So it's a really big jump for her, really great 2 weeks for her. And people always wonder, like, what is this push that players are doing at the end of the year? Because yes, we've just had the US Open. A lot of people are tired. Even viewers are a little exhausted of the tennis sometimes. But this is a time of year where players can get a lot of points, earn some money. They're working towards the finals. But for Rebecca, for example, doesn't this mean she can get direct entry to Australia now? Possibly?
Yes, she'd be
Yeah.
because she needs to be top 100-ish. So if she stays around the 61 mark, she's going to Australia.
Yeah. So those are, I think, the big things there. So congratulations to her. And then Eddie at the Korea Open, which I think coming into the Korea Open, I think the big stories were Amanda Anisimova, who was there, and Emma Raducanu as well. But in the end, I think no one was talking about Beatrice Haddad-Mayer, who came out the champion.
Yeah, it ended up being a very, well, of course, a great tournament for her to win. And also, in the final, it didn't start well because she was down 6-1 to Kasatkina. And Kasatkina was playing that kind of brand of unpredictable sort of like, she makes it difficult. She makes those angles, and I think that was frustrating. And I don't think Haddad-Maia was making a lot of returns either. So yeah, it was, so it was very difficult for her. And then but she managed to regroup and in that second set, and then sneak it. She just won it 6-4 in that second set, and I was actually glad to sort of see that the final was a pretty fun and competitive match, because it had been a disappointing week in terms of like we hadn't had too many competitive matches. Like I think in the quarterfinals they were all like straight sets, and then of course Raducanu had to retire after the quarterfinals. So yeah, I mean I think obviously that puts Beatrice up close to sort of in the contention maybe to possibly making the WTA finals, but she'd be getting closer anyway to top 10, right? So I mean, maybe I'm not sure whether you'd expect her to actually to get there, but I mean, good week for her. She came through in straight sets and all her matches, except obviously that last one. But then she sort of took her time in that match to sort of I feel like, she started finding her shots. And I think against Kasatkina, you have to be a little bit more smart in terms of like your point construction and sort of, because you don't want to go too much because, she found her level and she was really good in that final set. So, yeah, it was really nice to see that final, and there was a big crowd there, and it was great, and they were having creating a lot of noise, so that was really good to see. They finally got something to cheer about.
Yeah. Really briefly, what's happening also right now, it's the most live tennis I've watched because the time frame works for me, but Laver Cup is happening right now. It's an exhibition that was founded by Roger Federer back in the day. It's always been, I think people have different opinions of Laver Cup, and maybe we'll have a more in-depth talk about exhibition tennis sometimes in the future, but I wanted to bring it up because I love Laver Cup. I think it's really fun. I think the matches I've watched so far have been super competitive and fun to watch, and it's definitely a different vibe. I think if you watch Davis Cup or Billie Jean King Cup, it's closer to that vibe, but you get sort of a little bit of what you see in maybe UTS with the coaching on the bench, and it's a really good time. I think, Eddie, we were talking earlier, you haven't really watched much of Laver Cup this year. Have you watched any of it, Nick?
No, it's not on a provider that I have easy access to. So, no, I haven't.
Where does it air? Where does it air in the UK?
I think it's I can't remember, to be honest. It could be Discovery Plus, but I could be wrong about that. Basically, I am one of those people who, whilst I enjoy Laver Cup in terms of the vibe and the atmosphere it can produce, because it's not a serious competition, I'm not bothered by it. So as far as I wasn't really looking for it. But yeah, it's not on Sky, it's not on BBC. It's like, I think it must be on Discovery Plus or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I've when I've watched Labour Cup, it has been when Roger Federer retired. I probably would have watched it if Rafael Nadal was going to be playing and that was going to be his last tournament. But yeah, for me, whilst it's a fun idea, I don't take it too seriously. So that's kind of where I am at with it.
Yeah, I saw someone, I can't remember who it was, but I think I saw it on X, but they had put their fantasy female version of Labour
I'd be
Cup.
watching that. It was Bastian.
I mean, can you imagine? Oh, it was Bastian. Can you imagine if it was sort of like Iga, Arena, and like Rybakina for Europe?
I
can you
feel
imagine them
like
on the same
Europe
team?
would be just basically unbeatable.
I mean, but just even seeing that dynamic of them all working together on a team and, what would Team World be? I don't know. Like, it got me all of a sudden so excited. I was like, oh my God, why is there not a female version of Labour Cup? Let's do that. Let's do that because it would be so much fun. But yeah, we'll have a longer discussion about Labour Cup. But if you're interested, that's still going on. I think Team World, as we record, are leading right now. And, but there's still hope for Team Europe. It's actually been hilariously competitive because I think if you saw the lineup, you would have thought, oh, Team Europe, they've got it. But I think having players like Ben Shelton, who's so competitive and coming from sort of the college tennis vibe, you can just see how much he wants it. But so that's what's going on. What's coming up? We've talked a lot about this, but throughout the podcast, but on the ATP side, we've got the Japan Open, we've got Beijing, and those are all ATP 500 level events. In Japan, Shelton, Paul, Fritz, Tiafoe, it seems like that's where all the Americans are going. They're all going to Tokyo. And then in Asia, we have sort of more of the top players. So we've got Sinner, Alcaraz, Zverev, Medvedev, and it seems like Triple Z is signed up for Beijing, which would make sense. WTA, it's big stuff on the WTA in the terms of like it's a Masters, but Nick,
we're
Eddie,
missing some people.
We're missing some people, a lot of people.
Yeah, so it's the Beijing 1000 that's about to get underway, and Arina Sabalenka will be the top seed because Iga Swiatek has decided not to play, citing non-specific personal reasons. There's a lot of doubt over Elena Rybakina playing. There have been a couple of fake rumours that she's pulled out, which I've almost fallen for. And so, yeah, we're down on a few people as well. Ons Jabeur and Alina Svitolina have chosen to end their seasons now. So, yeah, I think this Beijing event is going to be very much about can Arina Sabalenka close the gap to world number one and target that for the end of the year? What can Zhang Qinwen do we talked about that just now with sort of Chinese backing and how she's going to perform in front of her home crowds. What can Jessie Pegula continue this amazing run she had in the US? I mean, judging by Coco Gauff's kind of follow up in Beijing last year, probably got a good chance of going fairly well. And then it's about what other stories emerge. And like, that's the great thing is that like there will be different stories emerging, but that's kind of the landscape going into Beijing at the minute. It's a little bit of a weird one. Eddie, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, you've got to, I would say you've really got to fancy Sabalenka's chances if she's going in this tournament. But I mean, yeah, of course, Zhang is a player that we're all going to be interested in watching. I think that what's interesting as well this year is that, we've got a 96 player draw, right? So I think we're about to have qualies going on right now. So potentially some players there, especially sort of from this region of the world as well, that maybe wouldn't normally be getting into these 1000 events. Maybe they're going to have a chance to get in. So, but I always feel like, at this time of year as well, like, I mean, obviously you talked about some players withdrew as well, but like, it feels like sometimes you get some surprise runs at this time of year as well, as we sort of coming to the close of the season. So, that's something, that's potentially could pop up as well here. So, and I think obviously after that we've got Wuhan, right, and then that's going to be just the smaller draw. But yeah, big draw in Beijing. So
Yeah.
That
was I have to say, as someone who even keeps up with tennis, I have to say I had no idea Wuhan was a 1,000 level event. Like the WTA have so much going on. Like I had no idea they also had that coming up. So that will be a big one.
I have sort of a comment, I guess, on this sort of the way the WTA tour has planned out this sort of last stretch, because I do find it a little bit strange that we've just like barely come out of the US Open, and then they're like straight into like 2 1,000 events like back to back, and then you've got nothing for a month basically until the WTA finals. I mean, we don't have nothing, but you've got like a bunch of 500s and 250s there. So I'm just wondering, it just seems like maybe they could like push them a bit further along, like like, or spread them out a bit, the 1,000 events. So I don't know, that's just kind of for me that would be the more logical way to do it. But I mean, I don't know what you think, but I mean the men's, because you've got like the Shanghai, and then you've still got the Masters event in Paris.
In Paris, yeah.
And then so I mean, it seems like a bit more spread out and a bit more sort of, I would say, logical. I mean, especially like if you're talking about the Asia swing, it would seem to me more logical to have sort of events leading up to the 1,000. Is it? You know what I'm saying? But...
Yeah, no, totally. You would have like a sort of tournament in between to get you there. But no, because as I found out during this recording that it was a 1,000 level event, I was like, oh my goodness, they have back-to-back 1,000. It's like there's no time to breathe. But that's a bigger conversation on tennis calendars, and we'll leave that to another one. But I didn't prep you really for this, Eddie, but maybe you can just jump right in anyway. But at the end of every fortnight, Nick and I pick a player of the fortnight who's usually a player that has done well or has had maybe a great match or great run or moment during the 2 weeks. Usually a less known player. We sort of like, I remember there was a time in the beginning where with Nick and I, it was Sinner and Iga. But now we're better at that. So I'll give you time to sort of go, think about yours if you want to participate in Nick. So I will start. For my player of the fortnight this fortnight is going to be Jerry Shang. He is a 19-year-old Chinese player who we've talked about throughout this episode. And I think I've watched him throughout the year. I got to see him live during the US Open. And he's just fun. Like, he's still so young and learning, but he's like a great player as well. Like, I love how, I think this is something recent he's been doing, but on his tennis bag, he has this like teddy bear that he clipped onto it, and it's become a thing, and he's really good on social media. I just think he's a really fun player to follow, and especially for the region, like us being at the Asian swing, it's such a great moment for him to play at home and play well at home. He's currently into the semifinals of the tournament, and it's I think it's a great moment for him. Really exciting. He had a great start to the year as well. I remember the match he had against Tiafoe. I think it was in Hong Kong where he beat Tiafoe, and it was like that was a really, really fun match. But yeah, Jerry Shang is my player of the fortnight, and let's see how he does if he gets to finals Tuesday, as we're calling it now, and if he goes all the way.
You want me to jump in, or?
You can jump in. Yeah, you can go next.
Okay, so I'm going to choose a Chinese player, but not Jerry Shang. I'm going to choose for my player of the fortnight is Bu Yunchao Kete, who just got to the semi-finals of the tournament in Hangzhou. Yeah. So, and I do that because, he's just got to the semis, having had very little experience at this level before. I think he played in one. He had one victory in the Masters, the Shanghai Masters last year. Obviously, of course, he got a wild card, but that his opponent ended up retiring. So this year, he's got the wild card into Hangzhou, and of course, he's got to the semis, won 4 matches. Or is that right? No, 3 matches, and then I mean, it's just it was not only has he got to the semis, he's actually managed to reach the top 100 as well, and you could see how much it meant to him as well. And also, he got a victory against Karen Khachanov, second seed in the second round. I mean, he's got a chance. He's going to have to play Zhang, his countryman, in the semi-finals. But I mean, regardless of how that goes, I still think, I mean, he's had such a good year because he'd won a lot of challengers. He started doing well. And just sort of this is almost the icing on the cake here. And then, potentially, he's got more tournaments here in China. So he could do more. And are we also meant to choose a woman as well, or are we just doing?
Oh, that's usually me. So, but you could choose 2. You're the guest.
You can choose 2. Yeah, you're the guest.
See. Oh, okay, so I mean, if I was going to pick a woman of the fortnight, I guess I'd probably choose Sonny Cartal, just because she, I mean, she also similar situation in a way, because she hadn't had any experience in I think this was her first. Was this her first WTA?
This is So you've kind of nicked mine, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
sorry. I'll let you go ahead then if you.
Yeah, so because I was looking through and I was like, is there unfortunately, this was a very unless you were watching the doubles, not great for the sort of the Asian women. Mai Hontama had the best singles performance in Huawin, and we saw Miyu Kato and Zhang Shui make the doubles final in Korea, Yudis Chong and Moyoka Uchijima making the final in Hua Hin. But I think Sonai Kartal is the main story that kind of we would highlight on Ground Pass. Qualifier, not done this well at WTA level before. I think her previous kind of noteworthy highlight was a 3rd round at Wimbledon this year. So Kartal's British, should say that. So she's kind of the new British name to have now won a WTA title. Big deal for her, I would say, because you're right, Eddie. She's not done anywhere near this well at a WTA tournament before, and she goes and wins the thing. And I remember, I would wake up every morning, I would check the scores, Cartel's won a couple of matches. That's pretty good, not bad. Came through qualifying, it's going to give us some good points. And then I turn on and then I'm following the scores, and I'm like, I got to watch this final. I got to watch this Monastir final that she's in, and she put a really good performance in that final. You would not Shramkova was the more nervous one, and she's got the more WTA experience. So props to Kartal. She's definitely one to watch. And if you're a British tennis fan, you should definitely add her to the list of people to keep an eye on when Wimbledon comes back round.
Yeah. So, I mean, this has been great. This has been really awesome. This is sort of our podcast, but I've learned so much just listening, just participating in it about the Asian swing and what you can expect. And it's so exciting to see all these players coming up. And Eddie, thank you so much for joining Nick and I on Ground Pass. Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so you can find me first of all on X or Twitter. It's Tennis Asia is my handle. You can find me there. I'm Eddie. And then also I'm on, you can see on YouTube, Tennis Asia TV, and then on Instagram with the same handle. And then also, the podcast that we put out is available on, Spotify, Apple, and all your good platforms. So we haven't had an episode out for a while, but we're putting one up soon. So you can look out for that if you want.
Awesome. Yeah, I will leave the links to all of that in our description. Again, Thank you for joining us for this episode. Leave a rating, a review, and, plan that trip to Asia. I think, Nick, I've been thinking about this and I was sort of like, there's tennis everywhere and you could almost plan all your vacations around tennis. So it's, you could be like going to Tokyo on vacation and hey, it just happens to fall during the Tokyo Open, right?
Sure. You're talking to a man who needs a lot of persuasion to just leave his house.
We're going to get you to Tokyo, Nick. It's going to happen. Anyway, thanks for joining us again for another week of Ground Pass. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having us.